Righteousness better in the people love ya. What's the yard in the one and they above ya? Here's the Daniel, free minister them there. Big up on the chest. CCN will have to go. Vote them out. Early out, vote them out. Time for them to go. Yeah, the CCM government will have to go. They're corrupted. You tell me why you sell your bread at the people them land. Why you do that for a little bit and nothing? Where's the 300,000 US? Where vanish and nobody don't know about it. The Navy's people broke up, less employment. We need better government. And it's the NRP government. We gotta take them to this time. We need to live in love again. In Navy's too much crime and violence. Even though we are broken up inside, never give up my pride. Don't know for them want to see we backslide, yeah. Can't take with me no joyride. Though I'm broken up inside. NRP never give up them pride. CCM want to see we backslide, yeah. You see, although I'm broken up, me never smoking up them heroin, them crack, now them coking up. Prestige no game box, I mean them can't talking up. And me gone serious, no guy can't close me up. Them try to toast me up, to get the most of us, then give we gun, until we gun shot it off to bus. Them clean off the rust, from in a Christmas. CCM will have to go, you know. You're telling the truth. Whoa. Even though I'm broken up inside, never give up my pride. CCM want to see we backslide, yeah. Can't take with me no joyride NRP. We broken up inside, but we not gonna give up. CCM want to see we backslide, yeah. Navy's people marks this now. Just give we strength from day to day, to the King of where we pray. Feel and strength and when me hope and pray. We have to feel away when them keep free money. Cause none of them can stop them youth up from stray. Because the world is spinning around on a mutual ground. One heap of things them do we like them want me fi frown. You know me never frown. Me mashing on me sound. My choices where I make. I just can't forget to show my brothers and sisters respect.
Thank you. Good evening. And if you're just joining us, you would have recognized that we had some technical difficulties. We apologize for this and ask you to bear with us. As we continue our discussion this evening on the social nets or safety nets or mechanism, our topic, defeating COVID-19 with social protection mechanisms. Before we had a presentation by Mr. Daniel, Hensley Daniel, a social worker, our resident expert. I would now ask Honorable Cleon Stapleton Simmons to make her presentation. The difficulty would have been with the internet, and I think we are back up and running. We had a special guest for you this evening, Dr. Gilbert Daniel, who was holding. We will try and see if we can have that opportunity to contact with him again. Dr. Gilbert Daniel, he's an internal medicine specialist in Washington, D.C., a son of the soil with some 22 years experience working on the front line. And Mr. Daniel, of course, our thoughts and prayers have been with you. And we are happy for this opportunity. He would be joining us and to share his experience on the front line in Washington, D.C., to perhaps share with us what are some of the true and factual situation as it relates to COVID-19. Our presenter, as I've said, coming right after Mr. Hensley Daniel, is the Honorable Cleon Stapleton Simmons.
Pleasant good evening, everyone. I wish to take this opportunity to thank everyone for tuning in into our virtual meeting series this evening. I wish to say a special good evening to the members of my constituency, Nevis 5, St. Thomas's constituency. I am very pleased to join in this virtual meeting this evening. I am happy to join you and to be able to share my thoughts on not only COVID-19, but also the topic that is up for discussion. I will first start by looking at perhaps the health implications. I note that um, so far, we have only had 4 positive cases in Nevis and perhaps 9 positive cases in St. Kitts. I do notice, and I wish to share with you that we have not had any reports of any successful recoveries. And so I take this opportunity to appeal to the CMO or the persons responsible for health in the Federation of St. Kitts Nevis to give us an update as to those persons who have fully recovered from the COVID-19 virus. Also, I note that we are also in a state of emergency, state imposed state of emergency for a period of 6 months. Those resolutions were passed in the House on April 17th and 18th, respectively, both in the National Assembly as well as the local assembly Nevis. And thus far, we have been experiencing a series of 24-hour curfew, particularly on Wednesdays. I also note that so far we have had 2 deaths of persons who lived alone, males. I am not sure or certain whether there's any correlation between COVID-19, but my heart goes out to people who are living alone and who are in isolation during this period of state imposed curfew, and also who are going through the challenges of dealing with COVID-19. As we all know, this is a period of extreme anxiety, stress. It is a difficult period for all of us. Our lives has been interrupted tremendously. COVID-19 has not only affected us from a health perspective, it has had an economic impact and as well as a social impact. And so far, we have not been paying much attention to the social impact. We have exhausted the issues of the economic instability of COVID-19, but not the social response. And so as we go through this period, I wish to just encourage everyone to just remember those persons who live alone, the vulnerable persons in our society, particularly our elderly persons, those who have disabilities, those who suffer from mental illnesses, as well as our young children or young people. I note there is a lot of grandstanding in both in St. Kitts and Nevis as it relates to care packages, economic stimulus packages. I see our dear Premier is now making international and regional news, grandstanding about his ability to forfeit one of his salaries. I'm not sure of the impact of that as yet. However, I just take this opportunity to say that this is a period of distress for our people. And in addition to that, I want to encourage both the government as well as the respective oppositions, political oppositions, to ensure that we do our jobs with some sense of responsibility and some sense of sensitivity towards the situation. I do not think that COVID-19 this pandemic should be used in any way to gain any political standing. And so I have not seen any real or strategic plans as it relates to the social impact of COVID-19 on the society. I am still waiting for a strategic plan that we all can see how the country would be retained to a state of normalcy during this period. I have not seen any gradual plan in terms of development or in terms of just restoring society back to some sort of normalcy. That is still lacking. And during this time, I know we are looking to our leaders for guidance. It's a very difficult time. However, that guidance, in my respectful view, is not very forthcoming. So I use this medium to encourage both the government as well as the opposition to use it as an opportunity to unite. I know the opposition based both in St. Kitts and Nevis has been unprecedentedly excluded from any discussion or any engagement in terms of putting measures in place to deal with COVID-19. And I wish to say that that is definitely having a social impact on our society, because at this time, this is a time where we need to unite, we need to be at the forefront, really coming up with ideas as to how we can be able to really take people through this pandemic, both smoothly and without any significant loss of life or any suffrage or damage, so to speak. Also, I am very mindful that to date, there has not been any strategic plan to deal with education. And education is something that I think is very important. To date, the public schools remain closed. School should have been resumed on the 20th of May. That has not happened. And therefore, all we're hearing is that the government is trying its best to see if they can seek devices, if they can be able to present training or classroom learning through social media. But we are still awaiting any strategic plan, any word or anything that has to do with education. I know parents, I'm a parent myself, and I know this is a period of anxiety. It could be very stressful in trying to deal and cope with your children. And so I want to take this opportunity to encourage everyone that is listening, to encourage our leaders to take this opportunity to not only grandstand, but also to become involved, to set strategic plans so that they can give some sort of comfort to people who are experiencing this distress during this period of COVID-19. I want to also encourage all of us, those of us who can in society, if you can lend a helping hand to our fellow brothers and sisters, those who are currently suffering or who may not necessarily have the economic means in order to afford devices for their children. It is not a time for us to really sit down and wait on the government, because so far they have not been very forthcoming and they have not been very honest with the people. I was made to understand that there's an initiative taking place presently where persons within our society, their children, are being identified for assistance for electronic devices. And I make this public appeal to say that I hope any measures taken to ease the burden or to perhaps give educational instruction to children, that it is given in a spirit of love and compassion, and that no child will be left without any devices or any materials that they need in order to have access to education. I think education must be accessible to all. And so far, what we are seeing is that we are having people being picked out, being isolated, being perhaps discriminated, for lack of a better word, based on their parents' political affiliations. And I want to really send a strong message to all that we cannot have this type of behavior in our little country at this present moment. We must be able to give wholeheartedly to all persons within society. And so, as we look at the social implications, we are very mindful that we have not seen any planning, any sort of organization. The social aspect or the social impact of COVID-19 has really been aborted by this present government. And the Nevis Reformation Party, being mindful and, of course, being a party of visionary leadership, we have noted this and we are now raising our concerns, and we will do our endeavor best to see how best we are able to assist people during this very difficult period. I know we have been collectively engaged in giving out a series of care packages or essential food supplies to persons. And we are going to continue in our initiative to ensure that we also reach people from a social perspective. We are going to beef up our initiative to check up on the elderly, to check up on persons who live alone. We are going to put as much pressure as we can on the government to ensure that our children education is not severely impacted any further from beyond this point. Education must be a priority during this COVID-19 period. And so I just want to open the discussions, invite you to ask your questions, give your comments, give your feedback as we try to meet you halfway in terms of discussing measures as to how we can really socially defeat COVID-19.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Honorable Cleon Stapleton Simmons. At this time, I would ask the Honorable Patrice Nisbet, elected representative for Nevis 11, to make his presentation.
All right. Good evening. And let me first of all recognize the president and leader of the Nevis Reformation Party, Mr. Belter Hector, and also recognize the presence of the Honorable Cleon Stapleton Simmons for joining the panel this evening to express her position on whatever matters which were relevant to COVID-19 as it impacts the society here in Nevis in particular. I would also want to say good evening to all those who join us regularly from the diaspora and who join us locally via the World Wide Web or YouTube or whatever media is being used in order to tune in to this program. Of course, I want to recognize the resident expert, Mr. Henry Daniel, who is here with us this evening, elucidating on the social protection strategies that are relevant to the social cohesion in any society. Of course, I would want to say that my prayers and my thoughts go to all those who have been affected, who have tested positive with the coronavirus, and I would wish them a very speedy recovery. Of course, I think we were told some time ago, based upon the statistics, that one person so far has recovered from that attack of COVID-19. Wish them well. I would hope that the others would recover fairly quickly, and we in St. Kitts and Nevis, we will be able to exit this pandemic without much people. Of course, this evening we are discussing the implications of COVID-19 on the social protection systems that exist in St. Kitts and Nevis, and Nevis more in particular. The idea of social protection system in any society is to ensure that the people, they have jobs and they have some level of income security. Of course, we know when people are gainfully employed, people will be able to poverty. We will be able to keep unemployment away. And that always aid in any recovery process. This pandemic has brought serious economic and social implications for Nevis. We hear about the job losses. Most of our hotel plant in St. Kitts and Nevis is down. They are unoccupied. Hotels are there, rooms are there, but there is no revenue. No workers are at work. Marriott has sent home its workers. The Four Seasons has sent home its workers. Wally Beach has sent on its workers. And the main tourism plant in St. Kitts and Nevis have virtually collapsed under the weight of this COVID-19. And so with the job losses, with the losses of income, we know what that leads to. In some situation, it leads to poverty. And in other situation, it leads to an increase in the levels of inequity in our society. And it would appear, after listening to the measures outlined by the Honorable Prime Minister and the measures outlined by the Honorable Mark Burntley, the Premier of Nevis, one would discern that there is no robust social protection system here on the island of Nevis. And so what you have? You have a situation where they are now making up ad hoc policy along the way. And whenever you develop ad hoc policy, you know what happens? You have a delayed response and you end up with limited response. And so maybe what one should do is to, first of all, examine one of their major responses in terms of a social protection strategy by the government as a result of this COVID-19 pandemic. They told us that they were going to offer the workers who are affected by this pandemic, they were going to offer them $1,000 as some sort of income support, some sort of wage or payroll, but I shouldn't call it payroll support, wage support, $1,000. And let us examine this. Let us examine this against the backdrop. Against the backdrop that if my recollection serves me right, in 2014, we were able, being a part of a government, to set the minimum wage at $360 per week. So what we were able to do after consultation with the various stakeholders, after having the meetings, we passed the requisite legislation to increase the minimum wage, set the floor when it came to wages at $3.60 per week. It meant that we had the highest minimum wage anywhere in the Caribbean. Anywhere in the Eastern Caribbean, St. Kitts and Nevis has the highest minimum wage. And that was put in place in order to protect our workers of the country. And so when you take $1,000, and let's say you divide it by 4, if 4 weeks are in a month, which is average, what they're offering the workers of the country is $250 a week. That is $110 less than the minimum wage per week. And so are you really telling me that this government is really serious when it examines the social and economic impact as a result of COVID-19 when it came to the idea of providing income support for workers? I would want to suggest tonight that they have failed the workers of the country, who have contributed so much in terms of the productive sectors of our economy. They are the ones who are on the front line, working in our hotels or restaurants, taxi drivers, wherever you can think of the sector. They are there working. But now that a difficult situation has developed, not as a result of their own doing, as a result of actions elsewhere, the government cannot at least offer them that requisite social protection that they are now in need of. Offer them at least the minimum wage. And then again, you have this challenge where if, for example, you are just on reduced hours, and so you're getting a little pay from your employer, the government is telling you that you will not be able to get the $1,000. All that they will give you is a top up. But does that make sense? Is that practical? If the government really wants to offer the support of $1,000 and move on. And the criteria that has been established in order to determine whether you qualify or not is a very strange criteria, because when you go certain classes and certain categories of workers don't qualify, one would have thought that in an era like this, you would relax the criteria for qualification. That is what you would do. Relax the criteria. For example, if you are a taxi driver and you operate in the tourist trade and you are not registered as a self-employed person, you will not qualify for that income support. And so, vast swaths of persons who are now struggling, they have formidable obligations, and lo and behold, when they go down to Social Security, they are being told that they do not qualify. So how will they be able to support themselves? How they will be able to support their families? And how will they be able to support their communities? When Dr. Kelvin Daly gave the response of the Nevis Reformation Party on the COVID-19 pandemic, he said, in terms of offering us pay protection, we in the NRP, if we were in the government, we were going to offer every person $1,500 across the board. And it would have been generalized. We will not be picking out persons out of various sectors. We would have generalized the support all across the board. That is not what we have in terms of this ad hoc policy that has been put in place by this present administration, whether it is in Sinkets or in Nevis. Again, there were certain measures that were designed for the business sector. And I would think that those measures for the business sector, the idea in mind would have to be that you are trying as much as possible to save jobs, reduce the levels of unemployment. And so, what you heard from the government in relation to proposals to assist the business sector was to reduce the corporation tax. Kept 10% of their employees. But if you're not taking any revenue, if you're not doing any business, why would you keep 75% of your employees? Why would you do that? It is more than likely that in a situation like that, the employer will choose to exercise the option to lay off, sever, or terminate the workers. One would think that a better strategy would have been to assist the employers with the payment of their payroll. Some countries have done that. In the great United States, in Canada, and I think also in St. Martin, there is payroll support given by the government so as to ensure that the employer keeps the persons employed. And that is a better way of providing social protection and support for the people of the country. Again, they would have announced a number of tax measures for the business enterprises. And when you look at the measures, you would realize what the government is basically doing is postponing the payment. But how does that help the business? Because a postponement of the payment at the end of the day means at some point later, those payments will have to be made by the business. We in the NRP said in our response, as a strategy to help the businesses so that they could save jobs, we will waiver those things, those taxes, those rates, whether it's land tax, house tax, or whatever, for a period of 6 months. A waiver is what is being offered in order to assist the businesses in this very difficult and trying time. I would want further to remind our people that we don't have an unemployment scheme in St. Kitts and Nevis. There's none which exist at this time. And so what is being done at Social Security, it's not a scheme that anyone would have contributed to. Basically, the contributions that have been made by people over the years, and whatever investment income that they have generated, they are using such in order to fund this relief, this emergency relief fund. And I am saying that if those are the circumstances under which this fund has been capitalized, I would believe that most persons in St. Kitts and Nevis at some point in their lifetime would have contributed to Social Security. And so, in this very difficult economic time, one would think that whatever relief is going to be given to the people of the country in order to assist them in this period should be given across the board. And there should be no discrimination in terms of who benefits from who ain't benefit. And before I go, there's one other issue that I would want to touch. And the Honorable Cleon Stapleton Simmons spoke about the education of our children. And I want to remind the people of this country that we had in place 2 social protection strategies for our children. We had that. The first was a REACH program. That program was called Recognizing Everyone's Ability to Climb Higher, everyone's ability to reach. And what that program provided was important income support for middle and lower income families in this country. That's what that program provided, so that persons were being paid, students were being paid a minimum of $2,500 in order to assist them in their educational development, whether at CFB or at the Nevis Sixth Form College. The program was further incentivized to help students or to get students to study certain selected subject areas. And of course, this program brought tremendous relief to many families across St. Kitts and Nevis. And Dr. Daly will tell you that the enrollment at Clarence Fitzroy Bryan College increased after that program was introduced. And this was a program that was directly geared as to bring financial support to the many families across St. Kitts and Nevis. So you would have had REACH. And so you would not have to worry so much about maybe some of the effects of the fallout from COVID-19 on the education of your child, because they would have had monies available to assist them in their education. Secondly, the one-to-one laptop program. They would have had REACH, they would have had their laptop, and they would have been able to continue their education seamlessly. Both these social protection programs, both these programs came to a screeching halt upon the election of the Unity Concoction. And I say tonight to the many families out there, I say tonight to the many families out there who are suffering because their children cannot be educated, remember that election has consequences. And one of the consequences of the last election, when you elected these persons were that they denied your children the opportunity and the various programs that were in place to protect your children, shield them, nurture them, so that they can be productive members of society, were taken away from them. And so these policies that have been put in place by this government in terms of a social protection strategy, no way, to my mind, go anywhere near mitigating the fallout from COVID-19. And we should just treat them as failed policies of this unity concoction. I'll stop there.
G Wisdom NRP Nevis Reformation Party. Yeah, I will say do things and make things happen.
No more than ever, this is a time for strong leadership.
The people must come first.
With NRP, everybody benefits.
We have a vision to transform Nevis.
As youth, we cry out. We are vocal, and I, for one, cannot contain it any longer. But the current premier hears no one. We complain about the lack of employment opportunities, and he shows us his socks. We complain about the lack of opportunities to obtain a university degree, and he brags about lobster being a part of his diet. We cry in want of a better way for ourselves, a better future. And he says, look at me in my new blue suit. Are these basic things too much to ask of our premier? I think not. His record indicates that he does not care and that the job is more than he can handle. Perhaps it's time for him to go.
NRP, visionary, ready to transform Nevis.
Thank you very much, Honorable Patrice Nisbet. We have on the line Dr. Gilbert Daniel, our special guest. Good evening, Dr. Daniel.
Yeah, good evening to you, Mr. Hector. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well,
That's
and
why.
I want to welcome you to this, our virtual meeting. I know
Well, thanks.
sometime before you have tried to be with us, but the pressures
Yes.
and demands of the job. What I'm going to ask you to
Absolutely.
do, Dr. Daniel, is please introduce yourself. Let us know who you are. Speak to us about the disease. And of course, you can share your personal experience being on the front line, even if you could help us debunk some of the myths about the illness. Go right ahead, Doc.
And good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. Gilbert Daniel of family of Cox Village, Nevis, Gingerland High School, Sixth Form College, Alabama A&M University undergrad, Howard University Medicine, and Howard University Hospital Internal Medicine. I'm practicing in internal medicine in the District of Columbia. My primary hospital is United Medical Center, which is it's actually the only government-owned hospital in the District of Columbia. I'm also the medical director for two skilled nursing facilities in the district. And currently, of course, in this worldwide pandemic we're under the attack of COVID-19. And actually, one of the reasons why I couldn't be with you at the last meeting was that was the time when I was actually covering the hospital, and that was my first week of coming face to face with positive COVID patients who are actually ill. And it's a serious disease. It's not to be taken lightly. As you can see, it has caused tremendous damage. I mean, deaths, morbidity, both morbidity and mortality, as we would say, throughout the world, more so here in the United States of America and here in my community in Washington, D.C., because in my skilled nursing facilities at this time, we have, actually one of them, we have quite a few COVID patients, whom some of them I saw today. In the hospital, I've had to deal with the COVID patients here we have the actually so far we've had the necessary PPE, personal protective equipment, to actually help us manage this disease. And we've been able to, of course, we have the isolation areas for these patients when we actually ruling them out, and then when they actually ruled in, which means they're actually positive COVID patients. So we have the necessary equipment, at least I know we do, my nurses do, but still, that doesn't mean that the stress of this disease is any less because you have the necessary equipment to protect yourself. But it is quite an undertaking to be doing it daily, day by day. And of course, you have patients. I've had patients who died on my watch and my shift, and I'm sure as we go forward, there will, sadly be more. But, and basically there's no cure, as you know. But I want to emphasize to the people of Nevis and to the people of St. Kitts and Nevis in general that this is a serious disease, and the measures that the government has taken so far to basically lock down travel in the country was an excellent idea, I think. So far, I'm not sure. I think we've had about 15 cases in the country. Am I correct?
Yes, you're correct. You're correct.
I think we've had 15, but we haven't had really anybody. I'm following. I have some people who follow it a whole lot more closely than I do, but I'm following. And compared to what I'm seeing here, I mean, we have been lucky, and we should got to keep praying that we don't have the kind of outbreak that we have here in terms of the illness, because the necessary resources to manage this disease is immense. It's immense. I mean, I know we have ventilators at the hospital. I know that. I saw some when I was there. But we try as much as possible that we don't have to use them. And the measures that you hear out there, social distancing, of course, we still have to keep doing that, because first and foremost is not to get the disease, not to contract this disease. 2, facial coverings, which we are doing now, and you cannot forget the good old teaching that your grandmother gave you when we were children. Wash your hands, keep your hands clean, wash your hands at all times. Those measures still hold true. Now, this disease in itself, as we look at it here internationally, this COVID-19 is behaving different from other coronaviruses that, as you've heard, and I'm sure you guys have discussed this before, but we've had SARS and we've had H1N1, both of which are also coronaviruses. And we know that the common cold we had, as all of us who have had it as kids and continue to have it in our grown-up years, we call it, it's also a coronavirus, but somehow this coronavirus is doing some strange things. So we, no matter what anyone tells you, we still do not understand it as that. So we have to be vigilant. We have to be very, very vigilant. We don't understand it because it's behaving very strangely. I'm sure if you've heard recently, I'm not sure, but if you haven't, we've had cases where patients are just dying, and then when they've done the few autopsies that they've done, they've noticed that there's been multiple blood clots, pulmonary emboli, as they call them, just multiple massive pulmonary emboli in the lungs for some patients, and it doesn't make sense. But these are usually, and most of us in the Caribbean and in St. Kitts and Nevis, these are how Black people are dying for some reason, with just multiple pulmonary emboli in the lung, and it doesn't make sense. And then when they check, they also have what we call deep venous thrombosis, which are blood clots in the legs at some point, which breaks off and goes to the lung, and then we just have this multiple pulmonary emboli disseminated, as we would describe it in medicine. We don't know why. I've also had a conversation with one of my classmates who's now emergency physician in Orlando, and he brought me up to scale last week that they had one patient who presented with headache. I've had a couple of my own office patients who presented with headache and been to the ER, and they were sent back home because it's just a headache. Whereas we all been looking for cough, fever, shortness of breath, even hypoxemia, someone who's having low oxygenation. But those are just the early symptoms. Because my Dr. Scott brought me up on a patient of his who presented to the emergency room with headache, and they could not rate that headache for anything with the pain medicine and analgesia that they had. What they found out, and once they did the lumbar puncture, was there was COVID in the spinal cord. So this gentleman had COVID meningitis, which, I mean, usually we don't see the coronavirus as a predilection for the meninges. So we don't, it's just doing some strange things. We've also had some people here I know I've seen them here in our hospital with MIs. Some things you don't usually would expect from a coronavirus. So it is virulent, it's very dangerous, it's very contagious, as you know. So we just can't take our feet off the pedal. We've done an excellent job home in St. Kitts and Nevis, and maybe the fact that it's a warmer climate may have something to do with it. But there's still things they got to look forward to. So if you see, don't just be looking for the cough and the shortness of breath in us Black folks here in America and in the Caribbean. I'm sure you'll see the presenting symptoms could just be diarrhea, as I had this last week. Now that you've heard about those people with we call anosmia, with loss of smell, loss of taste, that's is also very common here in our communities. The last 2 patients I sent to the ER this past weekend, that was their presenting symptom. They're both positive with COVID. I've had some more presented with just muscle aches. And the first patient actually I had in my own office, which is the day we closed about a month ago, he just said he just didn't feel like himself. So he wanted to come and see the doctor. And I saw him, and he happened to be an airport worker. I just sent him for testing and closed. Actually, that's the day when I closed the office. Now, so there are too many people. We just have to all go on lockdown. That gentleman turned out to be COVID positive. So we do not want to take it lightly. There's still some myths as, hey, was this a man-made disease and this kind of stuff. I tell everybody that and I'll go back to my old teaching, is that I don't think there's any man this powerful to shut down God's whole world. So I don't think this is man-made, even though this coronavirus is behaving differently. But we can't take our feet off the pedal. We can't. And with the resources that we have at home, I don't think, we're not there yet. And luckily we haven't had to use them, but you guys, we don't want to see a COVID record, for example, in the one skilled nursing facility, the one nursing home we have at home. Because we've seen that up here, and it's been catastrophic in some of the facilities we've had here in the United States. Because why those people catch it, we don't know. They just have predisposing conditions, and most of them are convalescent. They have multiple medical comorbidities, so there'll be a setup. And if that happens, then what happens to the staffing? Because we have to be able to isolate and protect those people, and I don't know if we have that protection yet, but the measures, we just got to be vigilant. Just take it seriously. If you have loved ones who out here on the front line like I am, you talk to them and you'll see. It is very stressful on everybody. It's very stressful on my nurses. Every day we see them. For us as doctors, we come in and we go, we come and we go, and we treat the patients and you're writing orders. But the ones who have to go in there and actually deal with those patients 24/7, it's no joke. So we were lucky in St. Kitts and Nevis so far. But I'm also very lucky. We're good. We did it. That's us. That's the people. That's the government. That's the whole country coming together and doing it. And just be vigilant. There's still a long way to go, I think. But we're turning the corner slowly, but we're not there yet because there's too many things I'm seeing up here still that we don't understand. And until there's a vaccine, which most experts would tell you is about a year away, or medication, we've heard of one medication today now that the CDC is actually fast-tracking for treatment, but by the time that gets to Nevis, that'll be a whole different ballgame. I don't know if we'll be able to afford that. Even for the most of the Americans, they probably won't get it. To ramp that up to the scale, we probably won't get there for a while. And the testing will be another issue where I know we've been able to do enough in St. Kitts and Nevis, with here in the United States and everywhere else is still in short supply, because even when I send my patients, my nurses who have symptoms, they would get priority because they're healthcare workers, but they're still taking them at least a day or two before they can actually get the test done. So it's not so easy. And we'll have to ramp that up. But everywhere, we just got it. Everywhere, every one of us, it takes the entire village, the entire country. Be vigilant, look out for each other, and wash our backs, wash your hands, keep your nose, keep your face covered if you can. And when you cough in your sleeve. Okay? Any questions?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Daniel. And your presentation, I'm sure that we have learned quite a lot. For those of us on the panel, we have been listening to you keenly. and I'm sure those who are viewing also. I would want you, however, Doctor, to comment on the actual testing. At home, they're doing just selective testing. We have had of a population of about 50,000 people. We only know about 290 persons. Could you give us your take on the testing, and what is your view, particular in terms of the testing that should be done that would give us findings that we can work with?
I mean, to tell you the truth, and like I said, testing is in short supply worldwide. I mean, it's a worldwide, but I know here in America, which is the most prosperous country in the world, I think. Testing, it would be great if we can test everybody. And I think for everybody for all of us to say, hey, it's okay, let's go back out, let's open up and let's jam and have a good time, get back to work, get back to school, get back to our normal everyday businesses, get back, open up the restaurants, open up the barbershops, open up the coffee houses, open up the nail salons and the beauty parlors and everything for us to do that. Yes, we need widespread testing for everybody to do that. I don't think it's available. I know the cost of it, I'm sure it would be prohibitive. It's still incumbent upon the government to see how much more they can do. I'm not sure how much more they can do, because even here, I'm telling you, in Washington, D.C., where I am, this is the capital of the United States, they're not test. There's some patients, some of my nurses I know who were exposed to patients of mine who were positive, and even one couple of patients who even passed. I mean, I send them because people are scared. I send them for testing. They're not testing them because they don't have symptoms. So it's still selective because of the availability of the test. The widespread availability of the test is not there yet. I know up here it's not there. So I could imagine if it's not up here, it's not going to be down there. So I understand them trying to be selective. That's why they're even telling us that if you were exposed and you think you had symptoms, for example, I had one nurse I knew who went to New York, did a 21-day stint in New York City, working with all COVID patients in the Bronx. 21 days straight, came back. I sent her for testing. She hasn't been able, because she doesn't have any symptoms. So even though she's a healthcare worker, and I think somebody like me, we are the ones who should be tested. We're on the front line. But the thing is, if you test me today and I'm negative, then what happens Saturday when I go back to the hospital? You know what I'm saying? So we still have to do this. We still need to ramp up the testing and what the other told me here, the contact tracing. So not just testing, but if I'm positive, then, okay, Dr. Daniel, you stay home. I need to test your wife. I need to test your son. I need to check your bodies. I need to check Stachy. I need to see Obi and talk to see Keith and all these guys who you hung out with the last time. I need to see I need to see your entire staff. I need to see the other doctors you were around, and that's what you have to do to really, ideally, say we all can all go. But I don't think because of it would be the most beautiful thing if we can have these testing available, and we're lamenting that every day. That would be if the government can get it. I'm sure it's not because, I don't think it's because they don't want to do it. It's just because it's not available. So the resources are scarce. So they just really, you have to target it. There's no other way, because that's what we're doing here. I'm sending people to the testing, and they have testing here at my hospital Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays from 10 to 2. There's a drive-through testing. And even to get in that drive-through line is no joke, because you'll get up to the top of the line, and then if you don't have symptoms, they send you home. But if you do have symptoms, they send you straight to the hospital, which is the benefit of being so close. But that would be the ideal thing. But I don't think the testing, not even here in the United States, is not there yet. Then they just have not mastered that testing yet. They're still talking about some droplet testing where you can send home testing kits and do all those kind of things. I don't even see that happening anytime soon. But ideally, yes, Mr. Hector, I think that would be the ideal thing to do, but I just don't think it's available right now. So in the meantime, we just have to do the next best thing, which is we really have to prioritize those patients who are exposed, especially those patients with those symptoms that we're talking about every day. And then we look and see those, if you see someone who would have, right now our borders are closed, but anyone traveling in from New York, for example, that nurse I told you about, boom, she's coming in, you got to put her on, we put her on quarantine for 14 days, no symptoms, then they can get back up. Even CDC is saying now, basically, even 7 to 10 days, you can basically get off. But then ideally, why not she comes in after 1, 2 days, 3 days, no fever, 4 days max, go and test her, and then so she can get back out to work. But no, right now the testing is just not there. But That would be the ideal thing to do. Yes.
Okay, we thank you, Dr. Daniel. Another question I would want to ask you, because it's hotly debated here in relation to our schools again. If you were called in to ask to give advice in terms of what should we do in terms of our schools, what are the clear guidelines that you would want to suggest for us?
You see, that is an excellent question. As we wrestle with the same thing here, because I would just say, because I have a daughter who's 12 years old, still in the elementary school side, and I was saying if they were going to, we live in Maryland, and if they were going to open now, I'd say no, I wouldn't send her, because we do not have enough testing. So, right, Mr. Hector, you're on point to say, well, hey, we would wait until there's more testing, until we have some sort of medication, but to say that, hey, we can actually treat this disease, which we don't have as yet. So I would say for all intents and purposes, until we get more testing done, and actually we got to be able to test our teachers, Well, and then
Yes, as a parent, I just want to know the kind of decisive decisions. You spoke of your 12-year-old daughter. I mean, leadership is still important. What decisive decisions would have come from the school that you can say you can work with?
Really, what I would want to know is that they're telling me that before everybody goes in, okay, you're checking all these kids' temperatures, you know where they've been, it's just testing, Mr. Hector. There's no other way to do it. You have to have more testing before you can open up them schools, because you got to be able to you have to be able to do symptom management. You have to see a patient. I'm saying a patient. You have to see a student coming in. They have a fever, which means somebody have to be there every day checking all those children's temperatures, right? Or you're looking at them, they have a cough, they have fever, but then still you still have to know the home situation. Do they have somebody at home who's sick? So and then if you suspect one of these kids, you got to be able to pull them out and test them right away. You see, so it is still difficult until you have enough testing. I don't think anybody's going to be safe unless you tell me you're going to be able to sit children 6 feet apart in a classroom, which doesn't make any sense. I don't see that happen. We don't have the space for that, and not even in America that can happen. But until we can ramp up this testing, we're sure that we have some means of treating this disease, it's always going to be it's going to be a difficult decision for myself to make and for everybody else. I know.
Well, thank you, Dr. Daniel. We do appreciate you sharing this moment with us and seeking to assist in terms of the education and getting that message out.
Yes.
As a party, we are always happy when we can hear from sons of the soil like you who can help us in terms of bringing that message. Please stay safe, and we thank you again for being with us at this time. And I am sure that we would want to call on you throughout, because this program is going to be a program that we continue. So thank you so much, Dr. Daniel.
I have no problem. And thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. Appreciate it. Thanks, guys. Have a good night.
Thank
you. All right.
Yes, folks, there you had Dr. Daniel. Time is quickly going, so I'll pose some questions to the panelists so that we can have, while we were here, some questions came in. I would want to start with you, Mr. Nisbet. You give the government a fail grade in terms of the policies for hotel workers and a fail grade in terms of your policy for the business sector. And you made a connection there in relation to the minimum wage. Could you just explain to us why you are saying that the government would have failed in this regard and that an NRP party and the suggestion you're putting forward would have been better?
Mr. we are talking about social protection in the sense that people, lives and livelihood are at stake. We know the percentage of job losses that this economy has sustained as a result of COVID-19. It is there for each one of us to see. And we also know that the serious economic shock and social impact that this would have on people's wages. People will not be in a position to meet certain obligations. They will not be in a position to pay their rent. Of course, we have heard about moratorium on mortgages. They have light bill. They have other obligations to meet. And so one would have thought that if some level of wage support, some level of income support would be offered to persons who are affected by this pandemic, the starting point of this government would be at the minimum wage. It is this the cornerstone of any social protection strategy is to set a floor. In other words, you can't go below that particular flooring. And so to come and to say to people that I could only offer you $1,000, it is an insult. The government boasts about all kinds of surpluses that they have. Year after year, you hear them talking about surpluses. Now has come the time. If they say they have these surpluses, spend the surpluses on the people, because the people would have worked hard in the country so as to enable the government to acquire the surplus over time. And this is the perfect opportunity, in my mind, to say to the people in your hour of difficulty, in your hour of need, we are a compassionate government. We have a heart. We not only see this as a legal obligation, but a moral obligation. And we're showing the requisite leadership. And we are saying to you, we are going to offer you at least the minimum wage to assist you and see you through this very difficult and trying time, so as to assist you with whatever fallout, whatever challenge that you might experience during this time.
I would come back to you, Mr. Nisbet. Honorable Stapleton Simmons, we have had, you spoke about grandstanding, and what you recognize is that short of policies, leadership dilemma, and I thought you made mention of the Premier, who is now speaking in terms of his commitment to give up a salary. Your take on this?
Yes, Mr. Hector. The Honorable Premier would have made it his business to be very active in the media recently with his initiative to give up, I think, his local salary for being Premier of the Navy Silent Administration. My take on that is that whilst we welcome the initiative during this difficult COVID-19 period, I do not see the need why the need or the justification for the Premier to really be patting himself on the shoulder. The gesture is indeed a gesture of perhaps goodwill, one would like to think. However, one is left to wonder whether there is some sort of ulterior motive behind the Premier's initiative. And I say that very cautiously to say that this is a time when people are most vulnerable. It is a very difficult and challenging time for people during this COVID-19 crisis. However, Mr. Hector, one is left to wonder whether the gesture is really a sincere gesture of goodwill. And I am left to ask the question, what is our expectation as a people from the leader of this country? Surely one would expect him at this very difficult time to give some sort of financial relief or to ease the burden on the on the country. And so I dare say, how is it that we expect this type of leadership governance from our leaders? It's natural. It's natural. If your country is suffering, if they're going through a state of economic hardship, then you must do something. So how can we therefore be patting somebody on the back for something that they are expected and that they are paid to do in any event? And also, I look at the gesture, and to me, in my, it is just my respectful view that it is something that is somewhat marginal, marginal when you compare it to the burden that the premier himself, through his numerous activities, to the expense that the treasury has had to somewhat burden. He has robbed the treasury on many occasions over the past, over his leadership, over his premiership, by his constant traveling expenses. We can't, I don't want to really stress on the double salary issue, but the premier, through his numerous activities, the fact that, you know, we have coined him as a year premier, the fact that he is constantly away from the people, those things, his per diem constantly is a burden on the Nevis Island administration treasury. And so I think a better initiative or something that would have been well deserving of any compliments or any grandstanding would have been if he was able to give some sort of restitution back to the people for the salary, the federal salary, or even the local salary that he would have collected for the past 5 years, his annual salary, that is. I think that would have really shown great leadership, and that would have really eased the financial burden of the people of Nevis. But to forego just this mere 2 months or whatever it is salary, and to walk around patting yourself on the shoulder, calling up newspapers, presenting articles, what have you really done? Prior to COVID-19, the country was in a state of what I would coin as economic disability. Nothing is and was and still is not going taking place. I think it's from an economic standpoint. And so I say that to say that in a time when people are most vulnerable, if you're not going to do something from your heart, then perhaps it is best that you just don't do it at all. Because our people cannot afford to be taken advantage of during this time when they are most vulnerable, during this time of stress and economic hardship. And that is exactly what we are seeing. We are seeing the government, both St. Kitts and Nevis, using this economic plight and this period of vulnerability to really promote their political agenda and to grandstand. And I'm saying, as a people, as a representative of the people, that is not good enough. We expect good governance, we expect good leadership, but we expect genuine leadership. And that is something that is definitely needed within this country. We cannot afford to take advantage of our people during this time of need. And on one spectrum, you have all this grandstanding, but there's a complete lack of adequate policy in order to steer us through this crisis.
Uh, Honorable, we would have complained from the opposition that at every step of the way, we have been ignored. Premier Brantley is known to say that he would have included you.
Mm-hmm.
Give us your thoughts.
I don't know what Premier Brantley described as included me. I do recall that on about the March 23rd, he would have sent me a correspondence in the form of a letter, basically outlining some of the initial initiatives that his administration would have taken in light of COVID-19. He also took the opportunity to to ask me to somewhat give or to somewhat warn me to give guidance to some members of my party who he felt were putting misleading information in the media. And so I am not certain whether his correspondence really was to invite me to be in any meaningful way to make a contribution towards COVID-19, or whether it was just a means of asking, me on the opposition side to just ask members to refrain from putting things in social media, and that is a challenge that we have with the leadership of this country. There's nothing genuine. There's always some sort of underlying deception in everything that he does. There's an underlying deception in this gesture to give up one of his salaries. His ability to grandstand and to go all over the world and to make a big deal about this contribution being very marginal in its size. It is clear to the people of Nevis and to the people of this federation that there is no genuine efforts. There's nothing is genuine that we see coming from the leadership of this country.
Mr. Daniel, in your presentation, you spoke about skills training and education. What are you seeing now in terms of a social safety net for young people, and compare that with what you would have known that the NRP party would have put in place during your time in office? I'm not hearing you, Daniel. You're mute. I'm not hearing you.
You're hearing me now?
Yes, I'm hearing you now.
Yes. I just wanted to say that in relation to what Mrs. Simmons is saying, Patrice is saying, that really what is missing is public policy aimed at ensuring that you transform the lives of people. Critically, Mr. Hector, you want to be able, at the end of every school year, you should be saying, well, look, we don't have enough skilled people here in X, Y, Z, carpenters, masons, technicians. Data, policies have to be data driven. You have to have people who sit down and say, but look, now every major construction we do in Nevis, we have to fly in the higher levels, the higher skilled persons. So let's stop it. So when we were in government, we look at what's happening here. That is not only that there is a lack of skill, but because people are unskilled, you saw a trend towards antisocial behavior, crime, violence, robberies, and so on. So the responsibility was ours to address the situation. So what did we do? We addressed the situation first at the early stage with a homework assistance program to correct the problem early so that we don't have to spend so much money on rehabilitation. You deal with prevention. Prevention is the least expensive option. So we mounted the homework assistance program. We mounted a reading starts with us so that you could see that you want the families and the children to read, get people interested, so that by the time the children leave primary school, you don't have them to deal with in secondary school. I taught at secondary school for a number of years, and Mrs. Simmons too. And so I'm sure we met people who were struggling with reading at age 12. I'm saying this is a small place and we should stop that. And the second level of response was to target those same people who had left school with nothing to do and put them in a training program. We put them in a training program in Trinidad for a number of years. Mr. Hector, you went. Mr. Nisbet, you went. You saw them. You saw the camaraderie. And of course, as we come back now in Nevis, you see them pushing out and holding their own. And during the time they have been back, they have given a good account of themselves. Now, government is a relay. Government must be conceived as a relay. And if you want public policy to take root. And as I mentioned earlier, if you really want to help people, you have a transformative impact. And that what you do then, you say, okay, well, I sent them to Trinidad. You send them Barbados then by the Samuel Jackman Prescott Polytechnic, or send them to Jamaica to the VDTI, Vocational Development and Training Institute. Send them somewhere. We don't have them in Nevis. And then when COVID comes, they can't work. And then you have double problems on your hands. But what I believe, Mr. Hector, we have to be careful, because I believe in this society named Nevis. We want to have a group of people who are always looking out for something on the dependency line. I don't like that. My role as someone involved in social development is to reduce the numbers, so that number must come down to those who absolutely cannot. And there is nothing that succeeds like success. And when we were doing the Trinidad program, I was invited by the Leeds College of Building Technology to go up there to see what they want. And we were drafting the arrangements to continue. So I went to Leeds. They paid for me to come and look at their program because they wanted to be part of the program too. And we had someone in Canada, Quarters Griffin from the camps area, was organizing for us to send the people in Canada to do mechanic and so on and so on. We're losing the opportunity, Mr. Hector. And I have a difficulty with that, because what it means is that the people in the country must see the party and the people who are interested in them. If I keep saying, and I've said several times before, that as a black politician, my main responsibility, I owe the people the opportunity to get a skill or get educated. I owe them that. That is what I feel I am obligated to provide. And all I'm saying is that if we're not doing that, we're having a problem. And I forgot to mention one other thing, Mr. Hector, in the transformative area. And it's something we will find, I think, in relation to what all the other presenters were saying, is that it's counseling. This thing here is hard to cope with. We have to be able to provide counseling, not just going to the department. People don't go to counseling easily, but you have to have people moving around and knocking on doors and seeing how people are coping. Because think about it, Mr. Hector, you were working a month ago, you and your wife were working, and you had 3 children to look after and a grandmother, and all of a sudden none of you is working, none of the 2 of you is working, and you have to cope. And as Patrice is saying, you get $1,000 from the government from Social Security, but things are tight. We have never had to deal with this situation where there is very little relief at the end. So we have to have counseling by our people, and we have good people at the department. Of course, the NRP government made sure that we had good people at the department who can provide counseling. So they have to go now and knock on the doors, because this thing here can break. You see the situation in America where one doctor who had COVID recovered and then took her own life because she just couldn't deal with it. And I don't know how many people are cracking at the moment, Mr. Hector. I don't know. And I have a suspicion that people are under immense pressure. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Daniel. Mr. Nisbet, I have a question here that came in for us. The economy has been at a standstill for a while. Businesses are struggling. And as a woman in small business, I have had it difficult and has not made an income over the past month. Yet there's a state of emergency in place for an additional 6 months. Could you speak to us in terms of the justification of another 6 months period and what an NRP government would strengthen small businesses, or how would an NRP government strengthen small businesses within our community?
Director, I will deal with the last part first. When the Nevis Reformation Party was in government, and when we were a part of a federal government, we were able to implement and put in place a number of policy initiatives which assisted the growth and the development of business, whether it was in St. Kitts or on the island of Nevis. The person who would have addressed the question indicate her gender. And I don't know if she would recall, we had a program here in this country called The WISE, Women in Small Enterprise. And under that program, we were offering microfinancing to women who were in business. We assisted a number of women to start their own business. We also assisted a number of women to recapitalize their existing business, whether they buy stock, hire an additional worker, buy equipment, or whatever. These were deliberate policy initiatives put in place so as to assist the growth and the development of business. And it was indeed gender focused. So the women were not left out. We also introduced programs such as the SEED and the SAFE program. People were allowed $100,000 interest free. And a number of businesses around Charlestown flourished, were created as a result of those deliberate interventions by the government in order to ensure that business grew, business thrived, and businesses were able to sustain themselves in the economic climate. In relation to the issue with regards to the extension of this state of emergency for 6 months, I believe that persons would be aware that we went to the parliament, and when we got there, the government told us that they were going to put you into a state of emergency for 12 months. However, we debated, we argued that 12 months, 6 months, that was too much of a long time, because they were not presenting any reasonable justification for the first suspension of people's fundamental rights. Because when that lady cannot go into her shop so as to sell her produce and make income, that is an interference with her property rights. When people can't leave their homes and go to her business place in order to buy whatever she's selling, that is an interference with people's right of freedom of movement. And so if you are telling the country, you only have 14 cases, 6 have recovered fully, and you are not ramping up testing as powers indicated that you should do, and there is no clear strategy as to what is your plan going forward in relation to the various elements that were outlined by Dr. Daniel this evening. And one of the things he said is critical and important. And it's obvious they're not going to test you unless certain circumstances exist. But if you only have 15 cases and people are recovering, and you are saying that they're recovering nicely, what is the justification for a 6-month state of emergency? What is the justification? There obviously can't be, in my mind, no reasonable explanation or justification for a 6-month state of emergency. We told the government, if anything, have it for another 21 days. And so, if the 6-month state of emergency is not about COVID-19, well then what it is about? It is about what? Some sinister motive? Because an election is approaching And it's obvious people want maybe an unfair advantage in the election process. That is why you are putting in place a state of emergency for 6 months. It is obviously other factors and other reasons are guiding decision for a state of emergency for 6 months. Because I mean, polling day is not only about the only exercise in an election. An election is a period. And if you can't go and get registered, if you can't campaign, do house to house, if you can't have public meetings, it is obvious that some plan is being engineered somehow to retard your electoral prospects in the upcoming election. And to my mind, the government did not present sufficient justification for a 6 month state of emergency. And that is why I believe that the motive behind that has nothing to do with COVID-19, but to do with the pending general elections in St. Kitts and Nevis.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nisbet. Honorable Simmons, you spoke of the absence of any strategic plan in education. I know you come to the table as a trained teacher and background in education. The reason for your statement?
Yes. So, Mr. Hector, fortunately for us in St. Kitts and Nevis, we would have been able to view the impact of COVID-19 on the international stage before we had any confirmed cases here in Nevis. And so I believe COVID-19 effects really started actively about the last week in January 2020. And I think we had our first confirmed case around the 14th of March. And so that gave us a spans of perhaps 2 months where we could have actively prepared in the event, proactively prepared in the event that we were to be affected by COVID-19. The present government did absolutely nothing. They sat back and they waited until we had confirmed cases in order to close the borders and impose state of emergencies, basically locking down or shutting down the economy. And here we have a situation where there were no strategic planning in terms of any social well-being or any educational policies. And to date, we have the public schools remain closed without any access to education, to the ability to learn, to the ability to train or to discover anything. The children remain at home. You would recall that school closed for the Easter vacation some 3 or 2 days earlier than scheduled. And so you had the early closure of school, the 2 weeks Easter break, and now we are on the 3rd or 4th week, and still that was still insufficient time for the government to put some sort of policy or some sort of plan or measure in place to deal with education. And that is really telling me that education was an afterthought. It was indeed an afterthought. The children of St. Kitts and Nevis who attend the public schools, they really were an afterthought or no thought at all. The government clearly, through this blatant act, showed that they do not care about the education of the quality of education of the children of St. Kitts and Nevis. When we look at the private schools, if we were to do a comparison, the private schools took the initiative very early on in order to prepare themselves to do the necessary training for the different avenues that will be used to engage in online learning. And so by time school was scheduled to reopen on April 20th, the private schools were able to do so. And so those children who attended the private schools, at least I know, for Nevis, those who attend Nevis Academy, the Charleston Preparatory School, and even the International High School, they had the benefit of being able to resume school on time. They had the benefit to be able to attend online classes through the respective online programs. And so I just want to say that that is clearly indicative of the fact that the government is not a government that is proactive. It is not one that prepare. It is not one that have the youths on the agenda. And I do make this appeal to the listening public that election has consequences. Those consequences affect you and your children directly. And so as we are about to approach an upcoming general election, I ask the people to consider the Nevis Reformation Party as not only a viable option, but perhaps the best option in order to secure the future of our children. Mr. Hector.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Your final words, Ms. Simmons, please take the opportunity, and then I'll have you in, Mr. Daniel, and the most senior final, Mr. Nisbet, your final words.
Yes, I just want to take this opportunity to encourage everyone to adhere to the precautionary measures so that we could really reduce the effect of COVID-19. I encourage people to wash their hands, to sanitize their hands, keep their hands away from their face, to ensure that they build up their immune system by the natural intake of vitamin C, and also to practice social distancing. That is very important. The only way we can beat COVID-19 is if we enhance or increase the fight so that we are able to ensure that we protect and safeguard our families against and ourselves against COVID-19. Prevention is always better than cure. And so I want to ask the people to please ensure that when you have to go out in public, that you wear your mask. I also take this opportunity to encourage everyone to be patient. I know it is a period of great anxiety. It is a very stressful period. I myself have my own challenges. And so I just want to encourage everybody to just continue to stay focused, to be prayerful at this time, to also let us be compassionate and sensitive at this time. Those of us who are in a position to give, let us give to those who are less fortunate. Those of us who could give a kind word to someone, it's a period of isolation with the state of emergency. Ensure that you give kind word, that you reach out to people, let them feel your presence, whether by telephone, through social media. We have to continuously engage our people and encourage them. This is a time for us to unite as a people. It is sad that the government could not have taken the initiative to really include the opposition in any meaningful way so that we could have been able to face, this crisis together. But having said that, we know the type of people that we are dealing with. But I just want to encourage our people to take comfort in the fact that the Nevis Reformation Party, as always, we are here for you. We're here to support you. We are going to continue with our initiative in terms of giving care relief packages to persons. We are here with you fighting every step of the way to ensure that all aspects of the society, that no one is left, no one is discriminated against, and no one is left out during this difficult time. We are going to continue to pressure the government to do what is right and to do so in a meaningful and genuine way. So I take this opportunity to really give my heartfelt and sincere sympathy to those persons who are really going through a difficult and challenging time at this point in time. I want to also take this opportunity to wish those who are ill during this time a speedy recovery. And those who are facing financial hardship, I ask you to continue to pray that God is going to see us through this very difficult time. Just keep the faith and keep holding on. Thank you, Mr. Hector.
Mr. Daniel, your final words? I'm not hearing you, Daniel. We're not hearing you, Mr. Daniel. Your mic.
You hear me
Yes.
now?
Yes, yes. Go right ahead. Your final words.
Yes, I would just like to say that the circumstances we face are difficult. People can't work, you can't gather, and so we have to exercise real caution and follow the science, follow the responses from the professional people who are advising about social distance and so on. But more importantly, I think this is a good time for us to be our brother's keeper and our sister's keeper. So we know the people who are having challenges, and let's see how we could help them to cope with these challenges, because this really requires a special level of coping skills, and we can help each other know. And if we know that we are not in this alone, it will do something to help us to get over. I believe that the Nevis Reformation Party, as is the usual, has the kind of skill set and the kind of commitment that can craft an exit strategy. And that is important. And that is what I would like us to focus as we think about moving beyond COVID, that we have to have an exit strategy which ensures that we put people back to work, put people in training, put people in education, and provide meaningful employment for people. I think that is where the next level of discussion should be. In the meantime, let us continue to observe the regulations and trust and hope in the Nevis Reformation Party. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Daniel. Senior Mr. Nisbet, your final words?
Director, it is late in the evening, and I would detain you much longer. Just to say that this crisis, COVID-19 pandemic, has clearly exposed that our social protection systems that we have in place in St. Kitts and Nevis to protect our poor, our vulnerable, our displaced are totally inadequate. And this piecemeal approach, or this ad hoc approach that the government is embarking upon, so as to try to offer maybe a little relief here, a little relief there, really would not have the kind of impact that you would want upon the population here in St. Kitts and Nevis who are suffering, who are experiencing severe financial, emotional hardship at this particular point in time. And so in order for us to have a robust system of social protection, there has to be some serious scaling up, and there has to be some serious policy considerations and policy decisions made. We have not heard any announcement from the government which says that the social assistance that is given to persons will be increased. No serious adjustments you have heard in relation to the social assistance scheme. All you're hearing is that people are keeping meetings just to see who is going to get a little food. And all you're giving people is a voucher. to go maybe up to Rams or Hosford, valued at $200. Well, how long that is going to last among a family? And most families in Nevis, they consist of maybe 2 or 3 additional persons. I am sure what you get for $200 in groceries can be eaten or cooked in one day. And so instead of the government introducing maybe at this some sort of feeding program to assist those out there who are in serious difficulty, they really have not done so. But the Nevis Reformation Party, we have stepped into the breach. And that is why all over Nevis, we have delivered care packages, meaningful care packages, to bring serious relief to our people who are suffering at this time. The Caring Nevis Reformation Party has done that. And our care packages, they may not last you a lifetime, but I'm going to tell you, they are going to last you much longer than a $200 care package. Much longer than that. So we in the NRP, we have the skill set, we have the knowledge, and we have the experience to strengthen the social protection systems here in Nevis. And so we ask the people to give us the chance. Give us the chance again. And we will put back the necessary architecture in place so as to ensure if another pandemic comes, if another shock comes, the people of Nevis, we will be more resilient and we will be better able to mitigate whatever fallout comes as a result of whatever crisis. What the government of the day has proposed cannot cut it. Good night and God bless all.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Nisbet. And let me say a special thank you to those of you who are listening. We are happy that you stood with us as we brought you this message as it relates to our social protection network. As I said earlier at the end, you would be the judge. You would be the judge as to how effective our government has been in rolling out its packages, how effective they have been within our society at this time. Of course, we were not able to cover a number of areas. I really wanted us to look at the role of social security and what is happening, and to get the panelists' view on that, the way the government is using the social security resources at this time, those who do not qualify, but I believe there's time for us to discuss these things further. And so I believe we would have to come back again and have greater discussion, because the social network is a network that we can't allow to fail. Let me say thanks to those in the engine room, the director of the program, as I've said before, and all of those who assist. Unfortunately, tonight we lost service, but we were able to get it back up. That doesn't happen often. And so I want to thank the engineer. I keep referring to him as the engineer. And believe you me, this is a new experience for us. And we are happy that we had the vision that we should take on this role in terms of educating the people. Team players, I am proud, I am happy for the discourse that we had this evening. Next week, listeners, we are going to speak to you in terms of the House that should be dissolved. We are going to look at the voters list, some of the challenges we've been having. And of course, we are going to discuss with you at length some of the challenges. The speaker after speaker would have demonstrated to you the strength of the Nevis Reformation Party and how we try to listen to our supporters, listen to the residents of Nevis, and we are in a position whereby we can give you, as we have always done, sound ideas that show vision, and leadership. And so, team members, I want to thank you all for this program tonight. As we go, let us continue as we've been doing, staying in contact with our neighbors. I think it was you, Honorable Simmons, who said, let us reach out. We have been reaching out to a number of persons. Let us continue. I would say to you, gentlemen, the list that I was provided with in terms of the people that I have been asked to contact, I have done my part. Please continue. This is the time. The discourse is great. People are happy to know there are things that are being brought to our attention, and these are things that we could share with the general public. Thank you all once again for coming as we continue to fulfill our mission to educate the good people of Nevis. Good night, and until next week when we join you again with another virtual meeting. I am Roberto Hector, your host.
For the best in news and politics, visit www.nrp2020.com. NRP Minute News coming soon. Stay logged on to www.nrp2020.com.
As youths of today, we are the leaders of tomorrow. What are you waiting for? Join the NRP Youth Arm today.
We voting for NRP, the Performance Party.
We must all do our part to rid ourselves of this disease. For starters, let's practice good hygiene and social distancing. We continue to pray for our nurses and medical practitioners as they work tirelessly to prepare themselves to protect us from this pandemic. This message was brought to you by the Nevis Reformation Party.
Sitting around and saying that you will not vote because things are bad is not a reason to stay at home, but it is the perfect reason to go out and vote for someone like Dr. Daly. Voting is a platform for change, and quite possibly the most important one at that. To vote in candidates that want to change the problem you see. NRP, visionary, ready to transform Nevis.
As youth, we cry out. We are vocal, and I, for one, cannot contain it any longer. But the current premier hears no one. We complain about the lack of employment opportunities, and he shows us his socks. We complain about the lack of opportunities to obtain a university degree, and he brags about lobster being a part of his diet. We cry in want of a better way for ourselves, a better future. And he says, look at me in my new blue suit. Are these basic things too much to ask of our premier? I think not. His record indicates that he does not care and that the job is more than he can handle. Perhaps it's time for him to go.
NRP, visionary, ready to transform Nevis.